Hello and welcome to another unit review for Star Wars Legion. Today we are going to be looking at the brand new surprise unit, who of course is going to be Chewbacca for the Republic faction. A unit that nobody really expected until we saw those Yoda card reveals. And I have to say, it is pretty cool to see an extra unit snuck into the game this way. But let's go ahead and take a look at this new Republic Chewbacca unit, as it is a different unit card than the Chewbacca that we know as Han's sidekick. And first appear on this unit card, we are going to see that this iteration of Chewbacca is a commander, which is still pretty surprising to me, but it has a lot of implications that actually makes him a bit better than he would be in that operative role, and he is going to be a relatively affordable commander at that, at just 90 points. However, I have to say that he is really going for a competitive place in your army here. Not only is Clone Captain Rex 90 points also, but we are getting the new Wookie Chieftain, who is a fantastic unit for just 100 points, 10 points more, which means Chewbacca has a lot of competition for that commander slot, and I do think that's going to make his unit card a bit of an uphill battle to compete for a presence in your list. But beneath that point cost, we are going to see that Chewbacca has 2 training upgrade slots, followed up by a gear upgrade slot. And while these Wookiees do make fantastic use of that double training upgrade, gear isn't exactly the best upgrade here, and I would have much preferred a command upgrade slot. And that is going to be the first major ding on this unit in that highly competitive commander slot, as even the Wookiee Chieftain himself does have a command upgrade. But over on the right hand side of the card, we are going to see that Chewbacca has a white defense die, backed up by 9 health and courage 2. Beneath that, we're going to see that Chewbacca has no defensive surge, meaning his durability, much like the Rebel counterpart, is going to rely on his high wound count, and you are going to want to do everything in your power to avoid having to make those saving throws, such as make use of cover or get dodge tokens. However, I do believe this Chewbacca is going to be more inherently durable than the Rebel version, and that is thanks to a keyword that we are going to take a look at later. But while we're on the topic of surges, we are going to see that this younger Chewbacca is not quite the crack shot he was later in life, as he no longer has a surge to crit, but instead just a surge to hit, which is still fairly decent, and again remedied by another keyword that we are going to look at soon. Below that, we're going to see that Chewbacca is a speed 2 movement, which is standard for most troopers. And beneath that, we are going to see that he has the same melee attack as Rebel Chewbacca, sporting 4 red dice, backed up by that lethal keyword. And the fun thing about lethal that we need to remember is the fact that the more aim tokens you spend, the more you can increase that pierce value. So if you have enough tokens to stack on Chewbacca, he can potentially have a 4 red dice, pierce 4 attack, which is really going to hurt anything he punches. Still, I gotta say, when you compare this dice pool to the Wookiee Chieftain, I'm kind of leaning towards the Chieftain with that double rainbow a bit more, especially if you're going to be throwing these Wookiees into a squad of B1 battle droids. After that, we are going to have Chewbacca's bowcaster that is going to be very similar to his Rebel counterpart, with one minor tweak. It's going to be throwing 2 red, 2 white dice at range 3, backed up by the Pierce and Impact keyword, and this time it also is going to be gaining the Critical 1 keyword. So while this younger Chewbacca might not quite be that crack shot just yet, he is definitely practicing, and with just 4 dice on this attack pool, it's not going to be too often that you're scoring more than 1 surge. And hey, even if you do, at least it's going to be surge to hit. But once again, going toe-to-toe with that Wookiee Chieftain, who's going to be throwing 4 black dice, just missing out on that critical 1, I don't really think Chewbacca has him beat here either. And if I had to choose on these 2 units on their base stats alone, I would probably still spring for the Wookiee Chieftain. But let's go ahead and take a look at Chewbacca's keywords, as they are a bit different than his Rebel iteration. And first up here, we are going to have the Enrage 4 keyword, that is going to give Chewbacca infinite courage, and the Charge keyword once he reaches 4 wounds. And gaining charge on Chewbacca is definitely a huge bonus if you want to run him as a melee fighter, or perhaps as a skirmisher who's going to drop that crossbow once he starts taking hits and go charge into combat. But the real takeaway from this Enrage keyword on this iteration of Chewbacca is that this Chewbacca is a commander, meaning your troops around you will be using his courage to determine when they break, and that means if you have a commander Chewbacca with 4 wounds on the field, your clones are going to have infinite courage. Now that is a pretty awesome gimmick that is going to be one of the major appeals to taking this Chewbacca as your commander, but I am definitely tempering my expectations on this, as it is a situational gimmick, one that your opponent can simply counter by focus firing on Chewbacca or outright ignoring him altogether and breaking your units relying on that courage value of 2. And I think any seasoned player who has experience running a suppression list is going to know to do that, and unless you can tank 4 wounds on this Chewbacca and then run him out of line of sight, I think your opponent will identify him as the linchpin to this strategy and vaporize him with a focused barrage of lasers. Again, Chewbacca's base armor save is essentially a 6+, and I don't think he's going to last long against heavy focus fire. That being said, clones with infinite courage is a gimmick worth mentioning. But after that, we're going to see that this Chewbacca has a bit of a neutered version of Guardian. While your standard Rebel Chewbacca does have Guardian 3 keyword, this Chewbacca is going to have Guardian 2, and it's only going to trigger on commander units. But overall, I don't see this as too much of a nerf, as I don't really see Chewbacca as the best Guardian unit anyways, as he sports those incredibly poor defensive dice. And if you are a Republic player who's looking to cram Guardian into their list, you're probably going to be looking at running Obi-Wan Kenobi anyways, as he is the apex iteration of Guardian. Still, this keyword is going to synergize in with a command card that we're going to look at later, so keep in mind that he does have it. But after Guardian, we are going to have the reliable 2 keyword, granting Chewbacca 2 surge tokens at the beginning of the activation phase. And this, in my opinion, is one of the major bonuses that the Republic Chewbacca has over the Rebel Chewbacca, as this will help remedy those flimsy defense rolls. And as we all know, going from a 6+ to a 5+ on a d6 die means you are doubling your chances of blocking a hit, which is going to do wonders for a unit's durability. Again, Chewbacca already has offensive surge to hit, so he's not going to need those tokens for anything other than defensive rolls. And with 2 surge tokens, you are likely going to be able to use them to defend against a couple attacks should you become a target. But again, if your opponent decides to really focus fire on Chewbacca, you will burn through these tokens pretty quickly, and your defensive rolls are going to get worse with the more fire you receive. But lastly, we are going to have the scale keyword, one that appears on all of the Wookiees. They do live in trees after all, and keywords like this are always very much welcome to have baked into a unit, as I usually steer clear of spending my points on terrain-based upgrades. But what do I think of Chewbacca's unit card now that we have all the stats and keywords wrapped up? Well, I'm still definitely leaning more towards that Wookiee Chieftain, with things like Charge, Agile, a command upgrade, and a defensive surge. I think he's just a more reliable, specialized commander option, even with the improvements that this Chewbacca has over Rebel Chewbacca. And honestly, I just don't really see a scenario in which someone would include Chewbacca over the Wookiee Chieftain or Clone Captain Rex, unless you're going for the Yoda gimmick, which we will take a look at later. But for now, we are going to move along to the recommended training upgrades that I would slap onto Chewbacca, and these, for the most part, are going to be pretty standard options across all of the Wookiees. And first up here, we are going to have Duck and Cover, a card that's going to help reduce the amount of times you need to roll those weak defense dice, and really help the survivability of Chewbacca and other Wookiees throughout the course of a match. Now, most other Wookiee units have the Indomitable keyword, which really helps you keep those suppression tokens in check, and while Chewbacca doesn't have that, he does have the Enrage keyword, giving him infinite courage, meaning he can really abuse this card and not suffer the drawbacks of it. Definitely a solid option, especially if you want to make use of Chewie's Bowcaster and keep him as a ranged combat unit. But after that, we are going to have the Hunter keyword, and whether you are using these aim tokens to fuel lethal or reroll those 2 white dice on the Bowcaster, Chewbacca is going to be making great use of aim tokens, and I would definitely prioritize taking an upgrade that helps Chewbacca generate them. Now, what makes Hunter an even more ideal on Chewbacca is the fact that he has those low quantity, high quality attacks, which makes him ideal for punching around multi-wound units and heroes who don't have immunity to pierce. But after that, we are going to have the Tenacity upgrade, one that is a mainstay on the Wookiees, and it is going to do a lot for Chewbacca, boosting his melee attack up to a very respectable 5 red dice. And this is going to bring Chewbacca up to par with the Wookiee Chieftain when it comes to melee, as you now definitely have a respectable quantity of dice, because as we all know, quantity is a quality of its own. But lastly, we are going to have the Offensive Push keyword, a very popular training upgrade on almost every unit in the game, whether you are charging into melee or sprinting to cover to initiate a firefight. So if you don't think your opponent's going to be running a lot of multi-wound targets that Chewbacca can hunt down, this is definitely a great alternative to Hunter. But again, Chewbacca loves aim tokens, and you should include a way to generate them when building your units. But with our training upgrades wrapped up, we are going to move along and take a look at the gear upgrades here. And I gotta say, this is an upgrade slot that I wouldn't be too upset about if you passed over it. But at just 2 points, Recon Intel is not a bad option here, especially if you plan on having Chewbacca lead the charge and go into melee. That speed 1 move may not seem like much, but it is definitely a boost, and you never know when that could get him into a charge a turn earlier. But after Recon Intel, we are going to have the other end of the spectrum here, and that is going to be the very expensive emergency stims. And at 10 points, this is going to stave off 2 wounds until the end of your next activation, which could potentially allow Chewbacca to throw another fistful of red dice in melee, or stay on the battlefield just long enough with that infinite courage value for the rest of your force to recover, preventing a total collapse in morale. Still, I find this card to be somewhat situational, and keep in mind it only takes 2 wounds. It doesn't keep him alive until the end of the next activation, so if your opponent manages to sink a few more wounds on him, he will still die, so there's certainly some what-ifs involved in this gimmick, and at 10 points I tend to avoid it myself, though it is worth considering. But that is going to wrap up the recommended upgrades that I would take on Chewbacca and move us along to his command cards, and this is where things get interesting. I actually postponed the recording of this video because I had a hunch the night before that Atomic Mass Games was about to spoil the new Wookie command cards that are actually general command cards usable by any Wookie command. But before we look at that new hand, we are going to take a look at Chewbacca's new 2-pip card, one that is going to be coming in the Yoda unit expansion alongside Chewbacca's commander card, and this is going to be a somewhat humorous 2-pip card titled Size Matters Sometimes. And I am just imagining the horribly awkward situation in which you play down Size Matters Not, and then your lady friend across the table throws down this card, and your friends watching the game never let you live it down. But in all seriousness, this card seems like it is a bit of a joke, with Yoda hopping on Chewbacca's back while he runs him up the battlefield. And this card's text reads that if you are within range 1 of Yoda, place Yoda within base contact of Chewbacca, aka on his back, and while you do this, Yoda will not be able to perform moves. However, Chewbacca is going to gain red defense dice and the deflect keyword, and will also be able to spend Yoda's dodge tokens. And yes, this can be used when he is either defending or using the Guardian keyword. So basically Chewbacca becomes a Yoda taxi and can deflect laser bolts while doing so. But here's my major problem with this card. In no 800 point list will you be able to viably run Yoda and Chewbacca, as that is going to be more than 300 points when you consider upgrades. On top of that, Yoda already has a bunch of other ways to boost up his speed, so as fun as this card may seem, and though it may be very effective for a turn, it is probably the most gimmicky of the gimmick cards, and the amount of setup this requires versus the amount of payoff that you might get from it is ludicrously out of balance in my opinion. And I think a lot of people are going to try and do this list once and then never play it again. But hey, maybe I am being short-sighted here. Let me know in the comments down below if you think there's some sort of synergy that I'm missing that makes this card more than just a meme. But after that, we do have a brand new hand of generic command cards for the Republic, and while they are general command cards who aren't hero-specific, the text on the card does signify that they need to be both performed for and by Wookiee units. And first up here, we are going to have the 1-pip card, which is titled Grugra Wurmf. And this card will activate either one Special Forces unit or one support unit, and if that unit either has a wound token or has lost one model, it will gain an aim, dodge, and surge token. Now, the important thing to note about this card is that it must be issued from a Wookiee commander. However, it is the only of these 3 cards that does not need to target a Wookiee unit. It can actually be used on any Special Forces or support units, such as ATRTs or ARC Troopers, which makes this card a pretty good one to have in your hand, even if you're not running a bunch of Wookiees. But after that, we are going to have our 2-pip card, which has my favorite title, Morau Grimorig. And this card is going to activate 2 trooper units, and if this card is issued off of a Wookiee commander onto Wookiee troopers, those trooper units are going to gain the Agile 1 keyword, giving them a dodge every time they perform a standard movement. And this is a pretty decent card if you plan on running a melee Wookiee blob, is that Agile 2 is going to give them a good amount of dodge tokens as they charge into combat, which can be used to give them immunity pierce thanks to the duelist keyword, which means your Wookiee warriors can really start headhunting heroes even if they do have lightsabers. Combine that with the Vigilance command upgrade, again something Chewbacca doesn't have access to, and you could hold the extra dodges until next turn, allowing your Wookiees to stay in the fight a bit longer. But overall, I have to say that is the main scenario in which this command card is going to excel, and if you just play this casually on any random turn, it's not going to be much of a power play, and just dish out a few dodges here and there. But lastly, we are going to have our 3-pip card for the Wookiees, and this one is titled And it will be activating 3 trooper units. And again, if this order was issued by a Wookiee commander onto Wookiee trooper units, they will gain the Demoralize 1 keyword, which is pretty interesting to see show up here. I really didn't expect Wookiees to be a major avenue of suppression, but I guess it is pretty thematic, albeit not very good of a command card. Now, if it gave those Wookiees Demoralize 2, we'd be talking about a really great suppression bomb here, but as things stand, with the limited range of Demoralize 1, it's going to be at odds with the Wookiee Long Gun, and I'm still not really seeing a clear path towards a Republic suppression list, though the keywords are starting to show up here. But with the command cards wrapped up, let's move along and take a look at how I would recommend a player builds Chewbacca if he wants to field him in his list. And first up here, we are going to have the Brawler build for Chewbacca, one that is going to focus on getting him into melee combat, be it right away or after a few turns in which you squeeze off shots with that bowcaster. And first up here, we are going to have Offensive Push. Again, a very good universal upgrade in getting aim tokens onto a squad, especially if they are going to be playing aggressively and charging into your opponent's lines. After that, we are going to have the Tenacity training upgrade, which I'm sure everyone expected. It goes without saying on melee units, and really helps flesh out Chewbacca's dice pool to something a little bit more impressive. After that, we are going to splurge a bit and spend the 2 points on that Recon Intel upgrade. Again, that speed 1 movement at the beginning of the game may not feel like much, but it certainly helps and may make the difference of when you get into combat or have to wait another turn under enemy fire. And coming in at 100 points, you can certainly do worse than this commander, and should this melee Chewbacca go unchecked, he can put some of your opponent's units in a very nasty situation. But after this, we are going to have a more ranged-oriented role for Chewbacca, and that is going to be the Skirmisher build, one that is going to focus on him hunting down and harassing other character or multi-wound units. And first up here, we are going to have the Duck and Cover upgrade, which is going to help him stay alive longer when he starts receiving fire. After that, we are going to have the Hunter upgrade, which is again going to generate aim tokens for him, which is super useful when firing that bowcaster with 2 white dice. Now, with Chewbacca being so split down the middle between ranged and melee combat, you could probably mix and match any of these upgrades here, and they probably are still going to work out for you if you want to play that mixture role between ranged and melee combat once his Enrage kicks in. But that is going to wrap up our somewhat rudimentary builds for Chewbacca and move us along to what I think of him as a commander unit in the Republic faction. And honestly, I still just don't think he's competitive enough to take that commander slot over Rex or the Wookiee Chieftain. The generalist Wookiee command cards are pretty situational and not that great, and his 2-pip is a bit of a joke in my eyes and requires a ludicrous points investment to pull off. And while I do find his ranged and melee capabilities pretty respectable, I think the Wookiee Chieftain's offensive capabilities are on par, and there's other things beyond that that just make him a bit more of an appealing unit in my opinion. So with all that considered, I am going to be giving Republic Chewbacca a ranking of C, and while I do think he is a better iteration than his Rebel counterpart, I feel that the Republic faction just isn't for him. And at the end of the day, this whole unit does feel like a little bit of a freebie afterthought to throw into that Yoda expansion, which is very nice of them to do, but at the same time, really nothing to write home about. But let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. I am a notorious Wookiee hater. I should probably even change my channel name to Bosk Wargaming. So if you think I'm wrong about Chewbacca, leave a comment below. Please explain your reasoning. And let me know what you guys think about these new Wookiee command cards. But we have a bunch more Wookiee content coming in the near future, so stick around, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, turn on your notifications, and until next time, as always, take care.